There was a young mother at a church dinner, and she had 3 young children. Now, you have 3 young children, and you're trying to get through the buffet line. If you can remember what that's like, just get 1 or 2, but if you have 3 and you're trying to get through the buffet line, it's kind of like herding cats, right? And you're just trying to keep your life in order and not spill anything or drop anything or step on anybody. It's one of those deals that's kind of chaotic. And she made her way all the way through the line, and she found a seat and got everybody situated in the food in front of them. And she turned to the children and she said, "You know, I just want to let you know, I am so proud of you. We got through that whole line and not one catastrophe struck us." And with that, the 3-year-old jumped up from her seat and said, "Well, where's it at, Mom? I'll go get us some." You know, I think sometimes that we just like to have a little chaos in our lives. I know some people like a double portion. You know, right? I mean, they operate their best when the world's just going crazy like that. But that's not me, and I don't know if it's you or not, but I think most people would rather be at peace. They'd rather have some peace and some quiet. They'd rather be at peace with the world. They'd rather be at peace with their neighbor. They'd rather be at peace with themselves, right? We all like that kind of contentment feeling, that feeling that we're not rushed and we're not in chaos and we're not in the middle of a storm, right? I think that's where most people like to be. Then why is it so hard to find peace? We certainly don't find it in the world, do we? You know, it seems like all you have to do is turn on the radio or look on the internet news page or wherever you look, the newspaper, however you get your news, and you see that the world is not at peace, is it? Somebody's fighting somebody. Somebody's killing somebody. There's always conflict somewhere. Seems like for as long as I've been around, there's always been conflict, right? I remember there was the Vietnam War. There's started it off, and all through my life, there's just been different wars, and very few times that we as a country haven't been involved in some kind of conflict since I've been alive. But if you go back over the history of the world, as long as they've been keeping data, they said, I read this week, it was like, whatever, 3,500 years of history, and only 8% of the time has the world been at peace. 8%. That's a lot of conflict, isn't it? That's a lot of folks hating folks, shooting folks and killing folks, and that's a lot of conflict. There's not a lot of peace there, is there? Think of all the peace treaties that have been signed. I think it's something like 8,000 peace treaties have been signed. I'm saying somebody broke their word a few times, don't you think? So world peace is kind of hard to come by. We in agreement with that? You know, we're lucky if at 8%, according to the statistic, 8% of our life will be spent at world peace. So that's kind of a hard thing to come back. But what about just our personal relationships with other people, like our neighbors, our spouse, our family, our co-workers? How at peace is it to find? How easy is it to find peace there? What about Republicans and Democrats? Oh man, election cycle. Please. We can't even find peace within our own party sometimes. Bernie against Hillary. Trump against Cruz. And it goes on and on and on. Conservative against liberal. And la 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 la. We're always in conflict, aren't we? What about in our personal lives? Half the marriages in this country end in divorce. That's not good. That's not good at all. I'm telling you, there probably wasn't a lot of peace in those marriages. Right? Most divorces don't end peacefully. I'm just saying. They may come to that point at some point later, but they don't usually end that way, right? The marriage doesn't end that way. So even in our personal relationships, it's hard to find peace. But what about within ourselves? How hard is it to find peace within yourself? That might be the hardest place to find peace sometimes, isn't it? It's a struggle. It's a struggle. We seem conflicted with ourselves, with our actions and what our thoughts and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. How should we behave and not behave? And do our actions and the people around us, they just throw me into turmoil, right? And in the past week, have you let anybody throw you into turmoil? Just curious. You know? Has anybody like cut you off? Even if it's momentary, it's like, what are you doing? You know, a little craziness there, right? Somebody cut in front of you in line or somewhere. Just little things, right, can throw us into chaos. Have a boss come and say, oh, by the way, I need this by tomorrow morning. But it's 5 o'clock. I got to go home and cook dinner. You know? It's easy, right? It's easy to let other people throw us into chaos. In today's scripture, Jesus is at the Last Supper and he's talking to his disciples. And the thing is, I talked about some last week. This is kind of a time when you're going to tell people the important stuff. You know the end is near, right? The last time we're going to eat together, and I want to tell you some important things. And you know, if Jesus had a last will and testament, this might be it. And he tells his disciples, he said, you know, my peace I give you. You know, Jesus didn't have monetary stuff to give. He didn't say, look, I'm going to leave you the beach house. Peter, you get the beach house over there on the Mediterranean. No. He didn't have that kind of stuff. Jesus wasn't a material person. He had the clothes on his back, and they were taken and gambled away at the cross, at the foot of the cross. So he didn't have a lot to give them. But what he did give them, and what he gave them was a promise, and a promise that he gives to us today. He said, my peace I give you, not as the world gives. Right? This is different. This isn't that kind of peace. But my peace I give you. Well, what does that look like? I'm sure we all got our own idea what peace looks like, right? I mean, if you're a parent driving with kids in a car, you know what peace looks like. It looks like quiet kids, right? Not screaming and yelling and throwing things. I gotta use the restroom. And when do we eat? How much farther? I gotta go. Can we play that game? Can we? I mean, you remember those days, don't you? Some of it's fresher in your minds than others, but you remember those days when you had kids and you're driving somewhere and they're going crazy. I remember being the crazy kid in the back seat. You know, be quiet. I just want some peace and quiet. But peace and quiet don't always go together. It's not always the same thing, right? Although when we think of peace, we think of something tranquil, right? Like a meadow, you're sitting on a blanket, the breeze is flowing through your hair as you watch the butterfly flutter over the flowers and flowing. No? Or sitting at a fishing hole, this is for the guys. Sitting at a fishing hole with your fishing rod, and the water still, and nothing but you and God and the fish in the water. Waiting for the bite, right? And it's quiet. The wind might be blowing a little bit if you're lucky. Sun's not beating down on you too much. Peaceful. Yeah, yep. That's it. Quiet, right? That's peace to you, right? Or here's one for Pam. Sitting at the beach with your toes in the water, just right there at the edge of the water, and reading a good book. Just the sound of the waves. One right after another. One right after another. As they run up on your toes. Children are playing, but they're in the distance. When they're close by, you just know they're saving away. Saving away. Right? Is that peace? That sounds peaceful. But I don't know if that's peace or not. I don't know if that's the peace that Jesus is talking about, is what I'm saying. Because some of us don't get to go to the beach. And some of us don't get to go fishing. And some of us don't get to sit in meadows on blankets and watch butterflies. Sometimes we don't get to experience those things. But we're still promised peace. You see, I think the peace that Jesus is talking about is not the absence of conflict as much as the ability to cope with it. Let me say that again. Peace is not so much the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it. In other words, it's not God removing you from the storm. It's learning how to dance in the rain. Because one thing is for sure, is that we are all going to have conflict, right? There is always going to be somebody or something that is going to come up in our lives that's going to stir us up. Why is that? Because that's life. Somebody said, that's life. It is life. That's what happens. Right? But it's what we do with that. Is what Jesus is talking about here. What do we do with that? Because Jesus promises, we turn over to John 16, just two chapters over, John 16, starting at verse 33, and you don't have to find it. You can just trust me for 1 minute here. I'll tell you exactly what it says. It says, these things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. That's trouble, in case you don't know. Trouble. But be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. So right there, Jesus is telling us there's going to be some bad days, right? And I think, I can't swear to it, but I bet if I took a survey, I could say everybody in this room's had a bad day. Somewhere in their life. Some of us have had a lot. And some have had a few. But we've all had bad days. You're going to have trouble, right? What Jesus is saying is you are going to have trouble. It's not going to be a smooth ride. It's not going to be, just because you're a Christian doesn't mean, hey, it's all good now. Get on the slide, go on down, right into the pool. No, it's not like that. He said you're going to have some trouble. There are going to be some obstacles. There's going to be some illnesses in your life. Yes, there's going to be some deaths in your life. There's going to be financial troubles. There are going to be people walk out of your life and break your heart. People you thought loved you, and you gave them everything they had, and they just walk right out of your life. There are going to be people like that. There's going to be days like that. There's going to be days when you've worked on a job so many years, and all of a sudden they come in and say, we just don't need you anymore. Ugh. That hurts, right? Those are painful days. What am I going to do now? I don't know, but you got to go. You got 5 minutes to pack your stuff, and they're going to come get you and take you out of here, right? That happens. That's stuff that happens. That's real life. Or you get the diagnosis from the doctor and says, you have 4 months. Make the best of it. That's real life. Jesus said you're going to have those days. You're going to have those days. Sometimes you're going to have those weeks or months. But the good news is, it's not the final word. A lot of times we have those monumental bad days, but then sometimes we just have little bad days, right? Some days it's just somebody's just done me a little bit wrong, or I woke up and there was a pimple and it's picture day. That's a bad day for some people, right? Doesn't compare to getting bad news from a doctor, but if you're a teenager, that's a traumatic day right there. I can't go get my picture taken. I have a pimple right there. What am I going to do, Mom? What am I going to do? Or you have a bad hair day, you just can't get it right. I don't have that problem, but some people do. Mine looks perfect all the time. That's right. That's right. Be jealous. So but in reality, we have those days, right? My girls used to come to me all the time. Dad, I can't find this. Oh, they just be in total chaos. And I tell them really quick. I said, this isn't baby seals getting clubbed. This isn't moms watching their children starve to death. This isn't a tragedy. This is an inconvenience. You need to calm down. Because it's a matter of perspective. We think our problems are so big, but in reality, a lot of times they're really not that big. They're inconvenience. And just because the world doesn't go the way I want it to go, doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Right? Doesn't mean that the world is going to come to an end. In November, there's going to be an election. And there's going to be half this country that's really happy. And there's going to be half this country that's really pissed off. Because their guy didn't win. Right? Am I right? I mean, I don't know how it's going to end, but I'm just going to say, just because the way the country's divided, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose, and somebody's going to be happy and somebody's not going to be happy. But the world either way will not end. Regardless of what they tell you on TV. The world is not going to come to an end the end of November. It's not going to happen. Or the 1st of January next year. It's not. It didn't come out the way we wanted it. Okay. It's not the end of the world. So quit acting like it. Alright? There are a whole lot worse things. Know and rest in the fact that this isn't baby seals being clubbed. Pam's caught on to me. So now when she brings me stuff, when she comes to event, she'll start off with, I know this isn't baby seals, but. and she'll tell me. And that's okay. As long as we look at things in perspective. Because I think half of what we worry about, half of the things that bring us down are silly things. We get so worked up because of the internet or because Facebook or because Fox News or CNN or whoever you watch tells you, oh, this is the end of the world if this happens and so-and-so's going to leave the country if this happens. Well, pack. I don't care. Leave. It's not the end of the world. The things they report on is ridiculous to me anyway. I mean, it's just like they cover the same thing 400 times and from 382 different angles. It's almost crazy sometimes. But why? It's to worry you, to scare you, right? That's the whole purpose. It's not to inform you of anything. I can guarantee you that. But what I'm trying to say to you is don't worry, because God's in control. It says right there, you're going to have troubles. There's going to be bad days, there's going to be bad weeks, there's going to be bad months. There may even be bad years, but overall, no matter what, in your heart, know this, I have overcome the world and I have the final say. And that's where we have to rest our peace. That's where we find our peace. It's not in things that we do. I told you about how much the world's been at war. Who do you think that depends upon? Depends on people, right? And how people treat each other and their greed and what they want and how much control they got to have and how much power they got to have. It relies on people. So to put it in perspective, to put your peace in the hands of other people is not a good bet. Right? We have a history of failing. But God doesn't fail. God promises He's going to be with us today. And He was with us yesterday. And He's going to be with us tomorrow. He's promised us that. He's told us that. And we have to put our trust in Him. The problem is that we spend too much time focusing on things that are not of God. And do not bring glory to God. And we get so caught up in these other things. Or how's it going to benefit me? Or how am I going to do? It's not about you. It never was. Man, that's just such a blow to my ego, and it's not. I mean, I hate that. But it's not. I mean, it's not about any of us. Not really. How many of you do you think there have been before you? And how many of you will there be after you? But you're here to glorify God. You're here to do things that bring glory to God. You're His children, right? He's in us and we're in Him. And we need to walk in Him. You know, we talk about trying to walk in His footsteps. He gives us His peace. That peace He had came from resting in the Father. He said, I'm in the Father, and the Father is in me. And He knew He was going to the cross, but He was at peace, right? You may be walking carrying a cross today, but you can be in peace about it, knowing that God's in control. Final word, at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen to us is what? What's the very worst thing that can happen to you today? Any ideas? Stump your toe? Huh? Have a bad lunch? You could drop dead. Right? Okay, so the bottom line is, 1.5 minutes from now, I drop dead here. Somebody else has to get up here and finish the sermon. But I drop dead right here. Worst case scenario for me. Kenny's done, he's finished. Push him aside so we can do communion. Let's go on with it. But Kenny's done. Worst case scenario for me is the best case scenario for me. Because my earth suit's worn out, but I will be with my Lord and Savior. So the worst case is best case. The world has nothing on me. Because my faith is in God, not in humanity. He said, I don't pay the bills, preacher. Said, that's all nice, but I don't pay the bills. I ain't worried about the bills. Worst case scenario, let's say you have bills. Let's say we have bills and we're behind on bills. What's the very worst thing that can happen? They come take my house? Okay. So you don't have a house. You think you can find another place to live? Probably a shelter or something. Okay, so you can find some shelter. It's the summer, you can live in a cardboard box. Well, that's nice. You can do it all the time. It's not the way you want it, but it's not the end of the world. You need to put things in perspective. Well, they can come take my car. We'll get a bike. Walk. I mean, there's always an answer. I mean, what do you think people did before they had cars? They walked. How many of you walked to school?
Rode horses.
Rode horses. If you could get a horse, you rode a horse. Or a camel. Or a donkey. Some people had to walk. Right? But what, and I'm not demeaning your problems. I'm not trying to say your problems aren't real, they don't matter. What I'm saying is that the bottom line is, you know, when David walked into that valley with Goliath, he had a real problem, right? I mean, if you just look at it in the circumstances through our eyes, you have a teenager and a giant. You have an inexperienced shepherd fighting a warrior. And you have a guy equipped with a slingshot and a few stones. He knew God had carried him through it before with the lion, right? And he knew that God would get him through this. You see, as you come to experience life with God, as you share and you learn more about God's faithfulness, His goodness, and His love for you, as you come to learn those things, and you experience those things, and you trust in God that way, you get a better sense of what peace is all about. Because you know, no matter what the problem, that God loves you, and He's on your side, and He's going to get you through it. Maybe not the way you want it to come out, but He's going to get you through it. He's going to take care of you. You know, it's kind of like that flower that unfolds in the sunlight in the morning. You know, you ever seen those flowers that close up at night and they open up so pretty, one petal at a time? It's kind of like our faith. You know, as we experience God's love one petal at a time, we kind of unfold too. And we get to know God in a new way. And our faith grows and our peace grows. And that's the peace that rests in here. That's the peace that gets somebody who can barely mumble words or put a sentence together to get up here and preach to you every week. It's that peace that comes from knowing that God will carry me through it. Right? That's what that peace is about. God's peace may have been the greatest gift that he could give to you. Because he knew there would indeed be troubled times. But you know, as you go through life, you can do it a couple different ways. You can be like that little girl and say, where's the chaos? I want to go get some. Where's the catastrophe? I want to go get me a little piece of that. I need some of that on my plate, right? And I know people like that. I mean, they're not happy unless they're miserable. Maybe you know some of those people. I don't know, but I mean, they thrive in that. That's I don't think they'll ever change. But I'm not one of those people. So instead of looking for the catastrophe, I look for the good. I look to see what God's doing in this situation. I like to see where God's present in this situation and where he's working and how I can meet him in his story. But it's not my story. It's his story. And how do I get into his story? And if I'm not in his story, then I'm in the wrong place. So instead of looking for that catastrophe, this week I invite you to look for God's story and to join him there and experience that peace that surpasses all understanding. May God's peace be with you. And all God's people said, Amen.